Hi, I'm Ray Kerlick from the law firm of Wadler, Perches, Hundl, and Kerlick, and I'm here in the Fulshear office answering questions about estate planning.
Everybody tells me I need a trust, not a will. What do you think?
Well, it's a question we get all the time, trust versus will. And the answer is they're very similar documents, but they do different things. Typically, our response to this is, the question really isn't trust versus will, it's trust and will. That is to say, do we need both? Because normally we would not recommend only executing a trust, but rather doing so in conjunction with an entire estate planning package. Now, typical things we hear about trusts. Trusts help with taxes. Trusts avoid probate. Trusts allow for privacy. And trusts allow me to do some funding today. Now, at least as to the first issue, which is tax considerations, for the most part, when we're dealing with what we call revocable trusts, and normally that's what we're talking about. Irrevocable trusts have a place, but it's a very limited place, and it literally means that the property or assets that you put in that trust will no longer be accessible by you in any way. So we don't normally recommend those lightly. So for the most part, I'd say taxes are not really a concern as between a trust and a will. The estate tax exemption levels at this point are way above $10 million. And so for most people, estate tax planning is not something we have to get seriously worried about. Avoid probate. Well, this is something that makes sense and has some truthfulness. Things that are in a trust do not have to go through the probate system. But does that mean we're going to avoid probate in all costs and in all respects? And the answer is probably not. Part of the purpose of a will is to be a catch-all. And by catch-all, I mean it handles situations where perhaps we haven't put an asset into a trust, or maybe some assets that can't be held in trust, like life insurance policies or interests in small, closely held partnerships or corporations. So the will is something that we would always recommend as the catch-all. So at least in terms of avoiding probate, it's partially true, but the reality is, at least in Texas, probate is relatively easy, so I wouldn't say that's a huge consideration. However, the next one is important, and that's privacy. At least in Texas, all wills that get offered at probate become public record. So if it's important to you to keep private how you're distributing your assets after your death, then a trust makes a lot of sense and is probably the best way to maintain that privacy. Finally, funding today. Again, think of it in terms of pre-inheritance. Basically what we're doing is we're taking assets out of the purview of the will and we're putting them into the trust today. The reasons for that is effectively to make sure that we've got proper funding for our heirs, for our people that were our beneficiaries in the future, and make sure that we can manage those funds potentially separately. It's also not bad as a layer of protection against potential liabilities. So when we're talking about putting assets into a trust, we're effectively taking them out of our name and putting them into the trust name. That provides a layer of protection from certain liability that you as an individual may have. So again, this is a reason to consider creating a trust. However, we can't do without the will because the will does some things that the trust simply doesn't do. For example, and most importantly, we can designate a guardian for our minor children. That document can be prepared separately, but again, it's typically included automatically with the wills we prepare. Likewise, we normally would, in our wills at least, would include a contingent trust for any minor children anyway, so we're already kind of building in some of the flexibility that the trust provides. That said, when combined with all of our other estate planning documents, this can make a good 1-2 punch to provide you the solution that you need for your estate planning needs.